This Hollywood star made a real royal gaffe when meeting one of the senior members of the British monarchy. But what did this Hollywood legend actually do? Hi, good morning, Neil Sean here in the heart of London. Thank you for joining me today. Hope you're keeping well. Let me know how you're feeling today, what you're up to, all that sort of stuff. Love reading your comments. I do actually really enjoy reading your comments, by the way. You know, some of them are so on spot, as it were, with the stories that we're covering. And I love the fact that you agree with me on certain things like the Winston Churchill debacle. Do you remember that one? What a mess. And of course, the evergreen Greta. I mean, really, what's that about? But today I have to tell you, we're outside a very famous building here in London, or indeed it was back in the day. This is Caxton Hall. Now, Caxton Hall was really famous, really, 30s, 40s, 50s, for all those celebrity weddings. In fact, right through until the 70s. But through these doors actually was a major Hollywood star, a British-born star that became a Hollywood icon. I was lucky enough to meet her very briefly once. We're talking, of course, about Dame Elizabeth Taylor. And it was here through these doors that she emerged after marrying the British actor Michael Wilding. Now, of course, as you know, Michael Wilding was kind of one of those actors that popped up in all sorts of things. Springtime in Mayfair, lots of Anna Neagle films, that sort of stuff. And the infamous Torch song with the wonderful Joan Crawford. Let's not go into that, eh? But yes, through these doors is, of course, the memory of so many celebrities. And the reason why we're here today is because that particular star, Elizabeth Taylor, was also a breakout star alongside the Hollywood legend I'm just about to tell you about. Well, this particular Hollywood star I got to know over many years. I went to interview him actually for the very first time when he came over to England to do a tour alongside wife number 8. He kept pointing that out, by the way. She wasn't too pleased, as you can imagine, but it was quite funny. He kept saying, the current missus, and I thought, this is not going well. However, we became firm friends, and I must share a very quick story with you also about when I took this particular Hollywood legend he wanted an ice cream, right? And I'll just tell you who it is, then you know. It's Mickey Rooney. Now, Mickey Rooney, as you know, an international star, been a star all of those years. Anyway, he came over to London and we were doing an interview and he decided that he wanted an ice cream. And we were filming in the studios over in Millbank, but his wife wouldn't let him have a ice cream because apparently he was on a diet. So we snuck out to get one. As I'm in this corner shop in the middle of London, looking to get an ice cream and paying for it at the counter, the woman says to me behind the counter, this young girl, "Oh, is that your granddad?" I said, no, it's Mickey Rooney. And she went, "Oh, right." No idea who he was. And when you think about it, the biggest star on the planet, the highest paid person, over the President of the United States in 1939, as he told me, and he was simply almost forgotten looking in an ice cream cart. However, moving forward with the story, this is what he told me about meeting one of our great British members of the monarchy and why it almost went wrong. Now, Mickey had been invited to an amazing event in Washington where our gracious Majesty the Queen was in attendance, right? And basically, when he got in front of Her Majesty, he decided to break royal protocol. Now, when you meet, as I'm sure you all know, when you meet Her Majesty the Queen, you are very much instructed exactly what to say, what to do, and how to behave. Of course, you can break that within limits. I have to tell you also, when you do meet people like Prince Charles at a lineup, you're dished out with mints so that should he ever speak to you, he won't feel any sort of coffee breath or brandy breath or whatever you've been drinking, that sort of stuff. But back to Her Majesty the Queen. So Mickey Rooney, alongside wife number 8, are presented to Her Majesty the Queen. He grabs her hand and kisses it. Now, nobody touches Her Majesty the Queen. This caused an amazing backlash worldwide at that time. It was in 2007, and we'd sort of met more or less just after that. He was absolutely thrilled, a great monarchist, loved the British royal family. And he told me this about why he did it. He really was known to being cheeky and that sort of stuff. He didn't really care what he said or what he did. And by the point that he was meeting Her Majesty, he was well into his 80s. Sadly, we lost him when he was 93 years old. But what he told me was, well, look, he knew he was meeting Her Majesty the Queen. He was an old ham. He wanted to make sure that he got world headlines. And he knew at his age it was going to be very difficult to knock those young whippersnappers off the front pages. So he did what he shouldn't have done. Now, was Her Majesty angry with the Hollywood legend? Well, apparently not, and he had proof to back it up. In the studio, he produced a letter which he'd received from Her Majesty the Queen after he'd written to her to apologise for the, faux pas, shall we call it. She apparently was more than gracious and said it was totally all right. In fact, she told him that on the day and said, look, it's perfectly, it's fine, don't worry about it, these things happen. But then he received a letter, and he was absolutely thrilled that she obviously forgave him and didn't send him to the tower. But it just proves, the stories that you hear about our monarch and about the royal family and what you shouldn't and shouldn't do. Apparently, according to Mickey, she knew a lot of his work, particularly the early movies alongside Judy Garland. And the reason, as I say, why we stood outside this door today, Caxton Hall, is because Mickey co-starred with, of course, Elizabeth Taylor in International Velvet, which made her a star. Over the years, we shared many stories, many late night phone calls, and every time he came to London or I was in New York, we caught up together and talked about the golden days of Hollywood. I sure do miss him. He truly was a brilliant Hollywood legend. Neil Sean in the heart of London.